Alrighty, let's get started. Cutting through the cobwebs. A little Halloween tie in there as we get into closer to that fun date. Thought it would be a nice little tie in because sometimes, customer feedback can be a little murky, a little difficult to find those golden insights and make them really actionable and have an impact on your business. So today we're going to be talking about how to use feedback to drive customer success. And we have two awesome team members of the customer success team from ShiftPlanning. They'll be sharing how they've been able to really integrate feedback and better engage with customers to help them be more successful. I'm Sabrina Bozic. I'm the head of marketing for Waypoint Group, and I'll be the moderator for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat window to the left. We'll definitely save some Q&A time at the end. If you want a larger view of your screen, there is that option there if you click on the square icon or magnifying glass. And you can also take notes about the webinar, and it'll be emailed to you at the end. So if you're interested in that, please use it. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers today. First, we have Paul Piazza. He is the Vice President of Client Services for ShiftPlanning. And I should mention, ShiftPlanning is a cloud-based employee scheduling and workforce management software that businesses use all around the globe. It offers a centralized platform for communication, scheduling, payroll, HR documentation, and more. So if you're in need of that, check it out. But Paul joined ShiftPlanning after serving as the Director of Customer Success for Gainsight and has more than 2 decades of experience managing people, processes, and technology, including another leadership position at Marketo. He continues to ensure success throughout the customer lifecycle by building processes and best practices to scale customer success and support teams. And so he brought along one of those team members today. We have Ashley Nicholson joining us. She is a customer experience pro, having managed customer success for not only ShiftPlanning, but also Home Depot and Element Fleet Management. And she's really best skilled in building customer relationships, problem solving, and using data to drive her processes. And so that's one of the many reasons why we love her, because we're so data-driven ourselves. And then, of course, rounding out our panel of speakers, we have the CEO of Waypoint Group, Steve Bernstein. He is a B2B customer experience expert with more than 20 years of experience in transforming the way B2B companies measure and improve customer success with strategic metrics and tangible ROI. He'll be kicking off the conversation today, but you can see here our agenda where Steve will be talking about why feedback is different for B2B. Paul and Ashley will give us the how and why ShiftPlanning uses feedback, sharing some examples along the way, and of course sharing some results they've seen with the program using TopBox. And so then we'll end the webinar with some Q&A time, so be sure to send in those questions again. Don't wait till the end, till they leave the back of your mind. Just send them in as you go, and I will be sure to answer them. So with that, Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
Terrific. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So I'm Steve Bernstein. I've been doing this kind of work for a little bit over 20 years. And one of the fundamental things that we've really seen transforming this, when I say this kind of work, I'm talking about feedback and research. The most fundamental shift really is from these kinds of programs that you see on the screen to something that's much more meaningful and actionable. In other words, in the past, most of the insights have really been just aggregated, and you see a bunch of kind of pivot tables and crosstabs. You get a bunch of reports. Very, very difficult to action those. By contrast, what we're really looking to do differently in this kind of work in terms of gathering customer feedback is to move from anonymous surveys to something that's very targeted for individual contacts. We're going to move from aggregated feedback to complement that aggregated data, the patterns across customers and contacts, to also be able to provide a one-to-one view in terms of the individual relationship strength with individual contacts and customers. And we're going to move from lagging indicators to instead be leading indicators. We want to get out of this black hole that often this kind of research goes into and be able to make these kinds of programs much more operationalized. make it an integrated, embedded part of the organization that's a leading indicator towards the right kind of improvements. So what fundamentally is different about B2B is B2B is built one account at a time. Now, within an account, we've got groups of contacts. Within an account, we've got maybe a set of happy customers, a set of unhappy customers, maybe a set of contacts that we don't even know what's going on with them. So there's really one of the fundamental differences in B2B is that there really is no such thing as a customer. Instead, there's an account that is a group of people that comprise a buying decision, that make up a buying syndicate, if you will. And that group of people is important. It's important to understand the sentiment of that group of people and make sure that we are driving the right experience for them. And the experience, as Paul is going to talk about coming up in a minute, is more than just product. Right? When we're talking about feedback, we're talking about the comprehensive set of feedback that is designed to give us what did the customer experience and how aligned is that experience with their expectations. So the product certainly plays a key part of this experience, but it's more than that. It's about value. It's about success. It's about ability to transform an organization. It's about ease of doing business. It's about that overall relationship that your company might have with a particular set of contacts that are making decisions or recommendations inside an account. And within that, what happens oftentimes is within your firm, you've got a set of people that interface with customers in some way. You've got your customer, which has a group of people that work with you in some way. And what happens often is that no one person has a complete view of the health of the account because those relationships exist with different people at different points in time with different objectives. And what's critical to really start to be able to achieve here is this idea of pulling together that aggregated view, pulling together all those relationships, and driving that comprehensive 360-degree view of the health of a customer from all the aspects we've been talking about.
So, one of the unique things with our business, Steve, is we have over 8,000 customers. So everything from little tiny companies to very large companies. So with our smaller companies, which are just as important in my mind, is, they may play many of these roles. So, my CS organization's first priority, our first pillar, if you will, evolves around the product. Right. So the ROI our customers get from our product is our key driving force. So how we understand who we're surveying to and take that feedback to drive that back into the different teams, product, marketing, everybody throughout our organization, it's key to understand what hat they're wearing. Maybe it's all these hats. With larger organizations, you're going to have disparate hats. You'll have an account manager that may be doing some legal and purchasing with the medium-sized businesses. You'll just understanding that up front helps us direct and understand and then take that message back and say, okay, what is the influence of this customer? What are they really trying to tell us? So understanding the communication they're sharing with us.
Yeah, a really important point, right? The kind of the top of the pyramid strategic accounts worth a lot of money. You're going to have a much different treatment strategy than the bottom of the pyramid, the mass market accounts. You can't treat everybody the same.
No,
you just don't have the resources to do it. So I'm excited to hear how Paul and Ashley will talk to us about those kind of relationships, the way they're working with feedback, the way they're driving the one-to-one and one-to-many. So with that, Paul, let me really turn it over to you to drive the next set of the conversation.
Yeah, be happy to. So, looking at the buyers are not often the end users, right? So that is a big part to our organization, right? So in doing that, we look at all the different people and all the different areas of needs in the information that they pull into. So, we're taking that feedback from the CSM team, kind of understanding what's going to drive product improvement. So you have needs, you have product improvement. We want to look at reducing churn. We look at how we're going to improve relationships and actual reports. This all evolves around our customers' ROI of our product, right? So taking that feedback, as you said earlier, and sharing it and not keeping it siloed and having the reports that make it proactive so we can drive change ahead of it. So this goes along with our customers' life cycle. So key points, the survey at that point. So after onboarding, understanding some of the challenges, so I can say to the product that, hey, we need to do this a little bit better proactively. So we're ahead of the customer's life throughout the life cycles, right? So we can understand that. But also taking that verbatim information and sharing that with the next stage, the CSM team. So now they can create their strategies ahead of time before speaking to the customer, coming in with knowledge, saying, hey, we understand that you want to do this with the product and that you're happy with this piece. Here's the ROI that you're seeing from it. So the survey has given us a lot more information up front and making it more actionable for my team to be able to be nimble and adjust and come in with the communication. One of the things I always compare it to is like buying a car, right? If you go through all these steps of buying a car and you get to the finance guy and say, hey, I talked to the sales guy about leather, and the finance guy goes, well, let's talk about those leather options. You've already had that communication 3 times and shared it, and you've dropped the ball somewhere. The survey allows us to pick up those questions in the areas that weren't asked and be proactive about it to make a better customer experience and drive adoption.
Now, there's a lot of solutions in the marketplace also that focus on like product utilization, product adoption.
Mm-hmm.
How is this different? What are you doing different here with feedback that is not necessarily about, or maybe it is about adoption and utilization?
Well, I think it's complementary, right? So product adoption and feedback is waiting for the customer to actually do something, right? So a lot of times what they're doing and what they're saying are 2 different things, right? So I can look at somebody using a piece of the product and say they're adopting it, but maybe their feedback is that they're having a hard time adopting it, or there's other areas in the industry, in the company that wants to adopt it. So we can start talking to them about those things. A good example of that is maybe somebody's adopting it, but they're not happy with the user experience, and they're providing us verbatim feedback of that, right? So knowing that as a CSM and knowing that throughout my CSM team, and Ashley can talk more about that specific area, helps us better communicate with our customers. It's all about communication, right? I can look and make a judgment off of how they're using it, or I can listen to what they're telling me through surveys, through communications, to really understand how to effectively understand what they want and then deliver on it.
You mentioned earlier about the kind of top of the pyramid, the strategic accounts versus the bottom of the pyramid, the mass kind of account, the smaller accounts. Mm-hmm. Do you find that those decision makers are also really able to give you feedback about the product, or are there other things that are important to really investigate with regards to that kind of decision-making process?
Oh, there's a lot of different pieces to investigate. It's a good question. So with the top of the pyramid, it's going to be a little more complex. You can learn how to navigate through an organization, right? So some of the feedback that we get from TopBox allows us to say, okay, who's communicating with us, what level they're at. So this is with large organizations. And so we could be talking to an influencer, but we also know that perhaps the end user is really happy with this as well. So we can take those type of feedback and do some comparisons, right? Were we resonating well? Where were we not resonating well? So it allows the CSMs or the sales staff to be more strategic about how they work with an account. So, looking at that, then when you look at the smaller end of the accounts, if they're wearing many hats and we know the size and we're bringing over that demographic, we can also target our communications to understand that, hey, this is a happy guy that's doing everything, right? So, or unhappy, but it allows us to channel that through the other pieces of the organization. A happy person, we can ask them to be a referral in the restaurant industry, right? If we need a referral, my sales team needs referrals for the restaurant industry because it's a key point for us. So we're looking for case studies there. So we'll use that information to understand that.
Excellent. Okay.
So, ShiftPlanning, how we use the feedback for customer success. And Ashley, feel free to jump in and talk to more about this, right? So we're taking the feedback and we're using it as a conversation starter, right? That's the first and foremost thing. How do we communicate with our customers and really understand? I mean, that's near and dear to my heart, right? So how can we make sure that when we're speaking to somebody, it's a positive experience from the start, right? That we're looking at their ROI first. It's not about ShiftPlanning ROI of our customer base. It's about our customer base ROI of our product, right? So being able to have our conversations based on data, based on feedback, really helps that experience from the start, right? All the way from the beginning. Understanding, and then go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I was just going to say internally, Paul, I think the best part for us is the alerts that are able to go to the CSR. So, when a client does write in or fill out that survey, in our inbox, we immediately see an alert that says, okay, this client is a detractor or this client is a promoter, and what their thoughts are regarding the survey questions that we asked. So we're allowed to go ahead and able to escalate those alerts for the right people. For instance, if, Hillary, the CSR, she has a client that wants to speak more on a partner level to someone about integrating with ShiftPlanning, she's able to assign that to, myself or you to have more in-depth conversations and be able to talk more about partner conversations for the future.
So, I look at it as an overall process improvement as well, right? So now I don't have my CSMs cruising through spreadsheets all day long and being really reactive, coming at it. And I've seen this in many cases in the past where CSMs will wait to the end of the week or the end of the survey and get a spreadsheet of all these customers that have been now sitting on a shelf somewhere, waiting for feedback on their replies to the survey. What TopBox has really done is increase the level of efficiency for my team. They get the alerts in real time. I have an SLA around concerned customers, so there's detractors, and then we have an SLA around promoters that we put in the marketing that we want to talk to, that we want to hear both sides. And even those customers that are neutral, we want to see how can we move them up the NPS scale. So really understanding those insights.
In addition, they're all extremely grateful for that quick follow-up that TopBox allows us to have as well.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. That is, probably one of the biggest things for me with this is because I get a lot of people that just, they'll either reply to the survey or they'll just send me a direct email. And the fact that we're able to reply so quickly, I get emails even after my CSM saying, you actually listened to my survey responses and I didn't have to wait 3 weeks to get a reply from you. It was almost immediate. Thank you. So then we see to detractors, like I had a detractor actually reach out to me and ask me a question after taking the survey and found it simple to take, and he was happy about that. But he was even happier that we were able to reply, that the CSM was able to reply. And he said, I'd like to retake the survey because I'm really positive. I'm happy you guys are actually listening. I was like, okay, well, let's talk about your experience. And that's a real-time ROI for me, right?
Yeah, sweet. It's great to hear these kind of stories, the payoff on the follow-up, because it is work, right? To manage all these follow-ups.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm hearing is you're seeing clear benefit from that follow-up work.
Yeah, the whole organization is, right? So when I take the feedback and I can share what my CSM's experience are with the customers, what their frustrations or happiness are, because it goes both ways. But also then I can take the data almost in real time, right? I can pull a report at the end of the day and say, okay, and I have to many times for the CEO and other people in my organization that want to know what's going on with our feedback, more so than just the NPS. The NPS is just a piece of it. Right, so we ask another question around what I call the parity score, and what that is looking at is, how if they give us a positive NPS, where do they fit, right? So do they see us as a partner, or where do they want to see us versus where do they conceptually see us today? And it's great because what happens is I'll see people that are promoters but want us to be a partner, and then see us as a product vendor, right? So I have a parity difference of a happy customer there. So really the question from the CSM standpoint, and Ashley can talk to this, is how do we move you from being a vendor? How do we make us become your partner? What do you want to see from our organization? That's a totally different conversation than, hey, we saw you give us an NPS score that's low and we want to move you up. That NPS doesn't mean anything. The relationship is really what means something to the customer. And so our value there is driving all our customers to be where they perceive us. If they only want to perceive us as a provider, that's fine too. But we want to understand what the provider means to them, more importantly.
Right. So so you're looking at that kind of expectation on the relationship, and you can take the Net Promoter Score or other feedback in the context of, hey, I just want you to be a vendor, and so I love you. I'm giving you a happy score, or I expect you to be more.
Yeah.
I expect you to be more of a partner, and therefore that's why I'm giving you a low score.
Yeah, or even go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I was going to say that's actually been the majority of it, is that we see clients that, they're more of a vendor now and their desire is to be a strategic partner. And I think, it is the very first question we're asking, like, in any relationship in our lives, what do you want out of this relationship? And our minds are boggled, truthfully, by the answers we're receiving. I don't think that in the beginning, starting this process, that I necessarily thought that everyone was going to desire to be a partner, and it's been the overwhelming response.
Right. So how do we move them to be what they perceive us to be, right? That's, again, it's about our customers' ROI of us, right? So the ROI of us is, what do you want this relationship to be to you, right? And NPS is a piece of it. It's not the end all be all, and that's mistakes I've seen companies make in the past. Really, this is the most important piece to me, right? If I have a positive customer or a negative customer, moving the negative customer up in the NPS score is important. Yes, I'm not denying that. But more importantly, this parity score to me is driving us on an equal relationship with the customer, where we're being what they want us to be. And if we're not, then what do we need to change to become that partner or that whatever they perceive us to be?
Well, and I love the idea that you mentioned earlier about working with marketing on those promoters, and I guess promoters that see you as a solution provider or a business partner. Yeah. Right, those are gold. So you're getting value out of both ends of the scale, I guess.
Yeah, in the feedback that goes into the different teams and how we utilize our teams internally, product, marketing, sales, right? So we can take the promoters, we can even take some of the, we're finding even some of the people that are in the middle, or even some of the detractors, looking at them, and if they see us as a partner, a lot of times it is just one or two little things we can go change. So I could say, hey, this customer sees this as a partner. They're a little bit frustrated. So now I can start to prioritize, what am I hearing from our customers, right? So if I have a set of detractors that see us as a partner, and they're all frustrated about one or two little things, or really happy about one of the little things, I can take that specific area and be more strategic, come at it with a surgical precision to say, let's change this, and we can influence our whole customer base just by this one adjustment to the NPS.
Well, why don't we move kind of, let's see what does it mean in the real world?
Yeah. So, when we look at our client success overall, right? So we're looking at our detractors. What it really means is, let's start to move these detractors up. Let's do this before. Let's make it actionable, as you said earlier. So we can start to change our health score and start to use the parity score and NPS to really drive changes prior to renewal, right after they've onboarded, right? So this is getting ahead of our processes. And that's really how I use it, right? Is my job as an executive is to make sure our processes are in place that are driving the ROI to our customers. So when I look at this, is make sure that the feedback we're getting is going back to the organization to go back to our main pillars, change the product or change our organization to do better by what we're hearing, right? So really kind of changing those things to drive it. And a lot of that goes into the actions that Ashley takes. So, we're able to, get ahead of our customers before churn. We're able to, look at doing this. So, Ashley, you want to talk about some of the results that you've had with customers?
Sure. And one of the things I was going to say, many conversations with Steve and yourself, Paul, both, on just being able to open up the dialogue. And then, I have an example that I like to tell. And one of the things that we can do with the detractors is we're able to identify it early and make a change with TopBox. So it's a way more proactive approach than a reactive. And I think that was one of the items that I had mentioned to you early on, was that our CS team, prior to the upcoming changes that we've made, was totally reactive. And, for instance, with the detractors and being able to identify them, I had a client on our side in our internal CRM that is 100% health. She absolutely uses the program as much as she can, from the scheduling to the time clock, everything that we truly offer. So seeing her on all of our reports, she's pretty much left alone because she's considered a healthy client. You can't get better than 100%. So during the conversation where she came up as a detractor on the TopBox survey, we had reached out, and she had mentioned to me specifically that she was unhappy. She was ready to move on, and it all was based around a report that we didn't have. And she said she needed this specific report, and we were able to come up with solutions for her by offering her a custom report. But without TopBox, I wouldn't have been able to have that communication with her to say, oh, you know what, she's unhappy. She's moving on. It prevented the churn. Now we're able to have more open communication, and she's definitely a successful account. She's even gone on to do some of our case studies and references with other clients as well. So we were able to recognize that, and then she was able to tie her ROI into that just with this first feedback.
That's awesome.
You know, and then we're finding that when you have a customer base like ours, where you have 8,000 customers, and they vary in size. So the feedback sometimes with the smaller customers, right? I have to look at how do I reach the entire customer base with few amount of CSMs. I have limited resources. So having processes and systems in place like TopBox really is allowing us to get ahead of those communications and really understand that. One of the things that I've worked with you a lot on, Steve, is what do we do about those people that don't respond, right? So that's also looking at that too. This is giving us feedback from those who don't respond. We know that, hey, this customer hasn't responded to surveys. We look at their adoption. We can look at how many support tickets. There's a lot of other things that raises the radar of. So we can take the TopBox surveys, the ones we're following up with, know we're on those. But what about those people in the middle? And what processes and increasing our processes so we can get their feedback. It's led into our marketing programs to our customer base to drive adoption, which we're starting to see. It's led into the other feedback programs that we have in the support that are now starting to capture communication, that are bringing it all into the reporting. That's helping me get a better understanding of our customer base and create more processes to drive adoption and make the product more valuable to them.
Fabulous. Yeah. And I mean, so you're able to see the health of a customer from this additional perspective of, proactive versus reactive. Is it all, you think, product focused, or are there other aspects that you're hearing?
Oh, a lot of other aspects. It's product focused. It's industry focused. They want industry knowledge. It's everything from how we interact with them, right? Or, especially with like the customers that fall more where we're in parity with and that have a higher NPS score, they want to become evangelists, right? So that's making them, they're more than just product people. They're people that are going to stand on their desks and shout the name, ShiftPlanning, right? So what it does is it's allowing us to take them away from the product and become that, but it's also allowing us to learn how we should communicate with them, which is more important to me, right? How do I address my customers from a one-to-many standpoint? I mentioned marketing programs earlier, right? So I look at the verbatim comments of what a lot of our customers are talking about. I look at what our customers are telling us, and then we can go back to marketing and say, okay, maybe it's not all product. They want to know knowledge about the industry. They want to hear what small business challenges they're going through. So now I'm saying, okay, let's take this beyond a product and let's take this into our messaging and start to pass that on what our organization. So what happens is we're starting to create content to help our customers be better at their business. And really that's what it's all about to me, right? That's what it all boils down to. Yeah. That's the why.
We talked earlier about, that feedback essentially is a reflection of somebody's experience against expectations. And those expectations are set by messaging. Yeah, marketing, sales, other people. So it sounds like it may be the product is kind of in the middle, but that experience around it, all those expectations they have are not necessarily about the product. It's about expectations in getting value out of the solutions that are set in other ways.
Yeah, the nice thing about it is over time I'll start to see it change. I believe this, and I have no reason not to believe it, is as we understand that messaging, those customers that aren't partners in the parity score, we'll start to move towards, I'm a partner now, right? Because I'm changing the messaging to become, I'm influencing you again to be better at what you do. And that's the difference between really, to me, being a promoter is I'm actually impacting you to be better at your life, better at your organization, better within your organization.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what some of the results are that you've been able to obtain.
Yeah, so we're doing our follow-ups with our customers. So it's helping us map our sales strategy. So we're able to return our customers well before churn, right? So we're looking at how we can get ahead of the churn itself, how we can identify that and have the communications like Ashley alluded to earlier. I mentioned sharing the VOCs throughout the whole organization, right? So target outreach. not over asking the same questions. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in doing this before. I like the dog with the picture. The product is understand the value and through product features. There's a report I actually really used a lot in in passing the information on to our product teams, and it really understands what pieces it helps us understand and communicate to our product teams what the promoters really like and what they value, and then what the detractors are frustrated with at different segments of the customer base, right? So understanding that report is helping me drive that in, and it helps me pull the right levers along the way, frankly, to make the adjustments. And it's giving, it's not licking your thumb, sticking it in the air and praying the wind's blowing in the right direction. It's actually taking data-driven information, sharing it with my team so they can help make the right decisions.
Ashley, is this one of your customers on the slide here?
It actually is. One of the highlights for me is we can tie this back even to our sales team, because I can't tell you how many times, and just the most recent one was I had one of our CSRs come to me and say, "Hey, you know what? I need a reference for a hospital." And it's like, "Okay, what kind of hospital do you want?" And they're like, specifically, my upcoming client is a veterinary hospital. Do you have anybody that we could give them to be a reference? And because of TopBox, the surveys, the promoters, the detractors, I was able to quickly go through and say, you know what, this person is willing to be a reference. And then it immediately allows specific people to start up those conversations. It also helps with, the product, what people are using in the product. Because of TopBox, I am able to say, oh, you know what, more people want information around reporting, for instance. And this was a huge one actually, our last wave came through and that was exactly what they said. And we were able to say, you know what, they're asking for this, let's deliver. We hosted a webinar. It was actually our largest webinar that people have attended thus far in our company history, and it was extremely successful. We had great follow-up from it. So, like I said, it's allowing all kinds of conversations to happen around us.
So again, the ROI to me is taking the information, making processes and things happen. I mean, we had 800 people register for the webinar, and over half of that attended. Right, that's significant, and then we were able to track it back to adoption, and we saw like a 20% increase in adoption of our product around reporting. That's what we heard from. It started with TopBox. The feedback we had was, "This is what we want to hear from you, what we want to learn." Right, so then we took that, we created a program around it. Customer marketing rolls into my group. We were nimble enough to do that, take the feedback, and within 30 days, have a webinar and create and show results of it.
Fabulous. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've been talking about is the importance of knowing your audience by a specific segment. I know that this is something that I think other companies maybe have struggled with. I don't know. I appreciate your perspective here, but we find it's really important to segment and analyze your feedback results in the context of your go-to-market strategy, right? That the experience and the expectations that somebody has are shaped by the market that they are in. So a top tier customer in the restaurant industry, for example, probably has very different expectations and needs than a third tier, a smaller account, a smaller customer in the medical healthcare industry. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. And it's so when I looked at different vendors and we looked at different survey products, that was one of the biggest challenges I had with, unless I went really high end. I couldn't start this, it's really expensive. By high end is what I mean, is I couldn't segment my database. I couldn't rip it apart to look at the different segments to do that. And it's one of the things I really use a lot from my perspective is if I want to look at a certain industry, if I want to look at a target audience. So beyond the audience, even just looking at the customer base itself and saying, okay, what do we want to target healthcare for sales, right? What are we hearing, right? What is the messaging we need to resonate there to drive our adoption?
So do you end up reporting, like one score, or do you report segmented scores, if you know what I mean?
So it depends on who I'm speaking with and what we're targeting. For the most part, when I look at NPS, we'll look at an overall NPS for the whole company. Now, if product is saying, hey, we hear some feedback or we want to target an industry, I'll break it down. The parity scores I actually look at, and I break those out with the NPS by industry or by target audience, right? So one of the key things I look at from my level is what am I hearing from my customers that are decision makers versus those who are practitioners, right? So that's how I segment, and that's how the CSMs look at it. So when we're doing a follow up to our customer base, we'll look at it and we'll split it up internally. But when I share the message at a top level, I look at NPS unless they want to drill down further, right? And the drill down's there for everybody. That's the one that I see is they can just log in and drill down and start to slice and dice.
Fabulous. Yeah. I mean, to be able to get so if I'm a vertical industry marketing person, I need to know what the health is of the stuff I'm doing, right? Or if I'm a sales regional rep, I need to know what's the health of the customers in my particular area.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I mean, speaking of segmentation, right, this is an example out of TopBox that shows for strategic accounts, what are the areas that I need to focus on, right? So we can slice the data essentially by just looking at the strategic accounts and get a sense of who's truly with me, who's not with me, and which are the most valuable accounts that I might want to drive activity with first. For example, when driving a renewal process, many times an account team will naturally migrate to the largest accounts. That's sort of expected. But in this example, you see one of the largest accounts, right? We've got on the x-axis here total account value. One of our largest accounts is very happy with us. They love us. So that renewal process is probably going to go much easier than, say, this account over here on the far right, which is one of our largest accounts, but completely silent. They're not engaged with us. They're not giving us feedback. They're not responding. That's going to probably be much more challenging. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got some accounts that are unhappy with us, that are quite large, but at least they're giving us feedback. And we can know what actions and remediations, I guess, to take to improve it.
Yeah, so when you combine this with like adoption data, the adoption data may be telling you another story too, right? So if you think of it as a quadrant chart, then as I'm planning my renewals and I see somebody that's low adoption and far right in your corner, I know I'm coming at it again with precision, right? That this customer is most likely going to churn and I need to be on it. And so this report is really, really important as you start to plan out who do I attack and how do I attack them.
And speaking of who, right? So it's the account level. And remember way back when we were talking about at the beginning of this webinar about there's really no such thing as a customer. There's a group of people in an account. So this would be a double click, right? A drill in from one of those accounts where you can see, who's with you and who's not.
Yeah, and Ashley can talk more to how we approach this, but what I like about this is I'm looking at a customer here, right? So I'm seeing who's responded, who's there, and being an old sales guy, I was always trained to walk the halls, right? So this is a way for me to walk the halls. And Ashley, you want to talk about how we use this?
Sure. So, my main reason for using this is I'm able to see, like you said, who the day-to-day people are, the influencers, the decision makers, see who did respond, who didn't respond. One of my clients, I believe it was 8 of them respond in one account. And reaching out, I had looked at the results. 7 out of the 8 gave us top-notch results. Like, okay, you know what, you're doing this great. I want to be a partner. We view you as a partner. Everything's on track to make what we would call a successful account. But there was one who was a detractor. And while I had reached out to the head guy, the decision maker on this, and I'm talking to him and I'm saying, what's going on? And he immediately replied and said, she's the one that's never going to give anybody a good response. She's basically a Debbie Downer. And you're sitting here and you're thinking, okay, well, 7 out of 8 isn't too bad. But at the same time, is there something I can be doing to make, my relationship with that specific employee or specific client successful? So it's really helped with being able to identify the relationships and try to make them as strong as possible.
And then from there, right, I mean, I think it's important also to understand how that account compares to other accounts, right? So maybe we have a strategic account or otherwise that is scoring something low. I mean, tell me what you think about this, but we see this example. It's not a real account name, Moonwalk LLC, but we see how Moonwalk is benchmarked against like accounts, other accounts in its similar segment. So Moonwalk, although they're rating success low, we see that in the success score, they're rating it relatively low. It is much higher in this account than it is compared to like accounts, as opposed to tech support, where their perceptions of tech support are also rated low, but there's a huge gap there in terms of how they perceive it relative to others. Do you find that, getting a sense of the comparisons against others help drive the right kind of actions and right kind of playbooks?
Well, it helps me not only do that, but it helps me staff appropriately, right? So if I see that, I need to be able to train people with larger accounts that especially specifically where they should see us overall. But as I'm drilling into like a key account or a newer account that's very large and I see they're scoring us low in certain areas, I'm going to drill in to see what was their experience. Why are they scoring us lower in support versus other areas, right? Versus other companies. What do we do differently in their cases, or what kind of cases are they having that they're scoring us differently? So it allows me to drill in and really change a specific customer's experience, right? So as we're going through and surveying in different areas, I'm able to peel back the onion and say, okay, why aren't they happy in a specific spot? If it's product, if it's services, if it's technology, what is it that I need to drill into for this company that they're seeing as different against this whole benchmark that we're looking at?
Yeah, and there's examples of great, so success, for example. Maybe it sounds like there's some things that are working well here in Moonwalk, even though it's rated low. There is success here relative to others.
Yeah.
And we can syndicate those examples to other types of accounts.
Yeah, exactly. So what are we doing differently there? Is it the program we have in place? Or if it's a low score, maybe we missed a step in a program, right? So we can look at the different levers, again, back to the levers we have to pull to bring equality with our different customers, right? So I want to get those as close to neutral so everybody's happy with the response they have, and it's repeatable, right? So it's all about process.
Yeah. Now, I guess to start to wrap up, and then we want to make sure we have time for questions. And I know there's been a lot of questions being asked on the chat panel.
Really
So speaking of questions, there's a lot of use cases, right, for TopBox, for feedback products in general. From a B2B perspective, we think TopBox answers some very different questions than your typical type of feedback product. But would you say these are the top questions that your business is answering or looking to answer? And are these are there use cases that we want to make sure we're emphasizing with the rest of the business and that TopBox supports?
Yeah, and it supports all of these, right, really, really well. And if you look at my first 5 reasons to go look for a product, the TopBox hit it out of the park on all of these, where I think really where it excels where others didn't. So where is it walking where others are not, is allowing me to start to look at data in different ways, segments, looking at things like, comparing customer to customer. Looking at areas where I can pull levers and be more direct with my processes and in my follow-up to my customers to really drive that value, right? So it's meeting all these 5, and I could probably add another 5 to this list that where I didn't know or didn't realize early on that really have a direct impact to our overall business.
Maybe our next webinar will hit the next 5. So maybe with that, I think there's been a lot of questions that are being asked.
A lot of great questions. Thanks everybody for submitting. So a couple questions about how often you're asking customers for feedback and how you kind of choose those customers.
Yeah. So we run a rolling survey because we have such a large customer base. So I look at customers 90 days prior to their renewal. We do an NPS survey at that point. It's about 10 questions. And then we're also starting, because we just started that when I came aboard, it's been about 5 months, we'll be starting our semi-annual survey, which will be more product related, smaller amount of questions and more focused on there. And then yesterday we just launched our onboarding survey. So right after a customer comes out of onboarding. So my plan is to have 4 touch points with surveys so I could be nimble and adjust to it, right? And then we do a transactional survey through support that keep my checks and balances on support.
And so 90 days before renewal, and how often, for the NPS survey you mentioned, and how often are you running that survey?
Every month.
Every month.
Every month we run a new list and we're surveying a segment of the customers that have, that's my, although we do monthly contracts, the annual date of anything is still a milestone in a customer's life, right? So I want to to make sure I'm measuring that milestone to make sure I'm on a relationship. Our customers could leave us at any time, right? And I don't want to bug them every month with a survey, right? I don't want to bombard them and tick them off, but I do want to know if they're happy or not. Are they getting the ROI from our product? Again, to me, that's the value, right? Am I creating a difference with my customers to change their lives, their businesses?
So 90 days in advance. Oh, go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to say I was on a meeting the other week with one of our largest clients. They are an amusement park in the United States and looking to go international. And she was telling me how much she loved our survey process. She wants it frequently, and she also wants us to send it out to all of her employees, which I think stands at like 5,000 employees. And so it just goes to show you that she's looking at those results as well and valuing, our feedback in order to make their company more successful with shift planning. So it was really neat to hear that because, you do worry about bombarding with them so many surveys, but this was a specific client that was like, no, give me more.
Well, and it sounds like she's saying that because of the way you guys follow up, I think, right? What do you think she'd say that otherwise?
It was very much, it was the first compliment she gave in that conversation.
And that's common. And that's why I don't want to over-survey, because then it becomes background noise, if you will, right? It's like, and I have to look at how I scale this with the amount of customers I have, with the amount of feedback. Now, I'm a big believer in checks and balances, right? So I'm always pushing my team to perform better. That's my role. And so what the surveys do along the life cycle is, as I push to do better, am I still equaling that customer's value, right? Am I still doing that, or is the value going down because we are trying to make our processes more efficient?
Yeah. And I bet having that monthly rolling feedback wave, it kind of makes the follow-up more manageable as well, because you have smaller numbers of people to follow up with.
Yeah. And we have, when we do a survey, I think the last one was like 1,300 people, we're getting a good response rate. Response rates vary from, verbatim, where people just want to reply back and talk to somebody, and I reply to every one of those, to where they'll fill out the survey and, that they give us feedback. It's pretty interesting to see just the responses that we get and the level of, even when they're not happy, that they come across and they still want to respond. And then there's the quiet ones that we don't hear about, and that we still reach out to and we look at, and we track in other ways.
What strikes me here in your answer to this question is, what's different here is feedback is the leading indicator driving the process, where almost every other company in the world seems to be executing in reverse, where it's sales, it's the renewal. Like, okay, we're in the renewal month, time to go chase after that renewal. You guys are being much more proactive, using feedback to drive your process as opposed to renewals.
Yeah, well, customers can renew every month, right? And, people are, especially in business, are savvy that the renewals, if it's an annual contract, which many of the companies I've worked at before were, they know they're going to get a survey. That's becoming the industry standard. So it becomes now, it's survey time because my renewal is coming up, right? So it diminishes the value of the survey. Whereas, I look at the feedback, and the feedback's got to go back in. And I think, again, it goes to one of our core values that, product and our product should change the customers' lives, right? So their feedback for us helps us drive what we have to do. We have to deliver for them, right? And they have to change their businesses for the better.
Yeah, actually, that's a great segue into the next question. We got a few about how you share the insights with the product team, and basically, how do you prioritize what should be done? I mean, people have questions or requests for things that are never going to happen, right? Little pie in the sky. But, how do you kind of prioritize them, or help the product team prioritize those things?
It's a marriage. Throughout the organization, it's a marriage. Everything's give and take, right? So what I have to do is come to them with data, right? What are we hearing? And then also understand what do they have in their roadmap and what their priorities are, right? And so it's all about, okay, this is what we're hearing. So what we try to do is we put together our top 10 lists, and we compare that to where they're working on and see if it fits in the roadmap, right? So what this TopBox is allowing to put more data behind it. It allows Ashley and the whole CS organization, including support, to really take that feedback and say, okay, does it go into product? How do we do this? Or at least change the messaging and be honest with the customer to say, it's okay to have the conversation to say, hey, although we've heard this request, it's not something we're going to get to for the next 2-3 quarters. People actually appreciate being told that, right? How many other companies in the world tell them, oh yeah, we're going to get to it, and then it goes into this big black hole, and that just creates frustration, right? better to be upfront and say, yes, I've heard this, and that we're not going to get to it, but it allows me to have that conversation based on data with my product and marketing and the different teams to address it. And it also gives us the insight to say maybe there are other ways to accomplish this. Ashley, remember reporting, and we go through, and if we can't put in product, we can start to dig in, and maybe there's more one way to approach it, right? So we can find other ways to approach it or help customers with it.
Yeah, it's so important to set those expectations and manage them properly. Okay, and then our last question has to do with those silent accounts you mentioned earlier. How much of a priority is that in your outreach?
It is definitely a priority. So we look at the silent accounts in different ways, right? So because we have such a large account base, it allows me to say, okay, this was a silent account, didn't reply to our survey. A decision maker, so we'll know who it was. We can go look at their health score and see how that's adopting, right? So if they're a happy customer, okay, or they seem happy by health score and they've had a lot of support cases, we can look at other measurements to start to target our customer base better. If it's a customer so it's allowing us to get a broader picture overall and then increase our programs to reach out to those, right? And then we can go in and look at, okay, did they reply to our marketing emails? Did they open this? So then we take another subset of that, right? So pretty soon we're narrowing down that subset based on other criteria, not just the survey, not just health, but all across it, right? All across our customer life cycle. So I can speak to the programs we've created around this from our customer marketing to drive adoption, right? So we look at those and see what the adoption they're driving is from and see if customers are doing it and did they reply to the survey.
That makes sense. I think a lot of people really forget about those silent accounts, and this is such a complementary thing, like you said, to health scores and marketing. Did they open our emails and things like that? So it's great that you're.
We're actually building those pieces, including TopBox, into our next health score, right? So it's all things that I'm going to look at when we start to build out and go to the next section of our health score, because it's that important to me to be able to target these customers and get ahead of them and find out why they're silent. So a lot of times it's just they're busy in life, right?
Yeah,
and that happens, but they still matter to me.
Absolutely.
So I know there's been a lot more questions coming in. When we will be sending out the slides and the link to the recording, and when we do so, we'll also have my contact information, and we welcome not just your feedback on the webinar, but also other questions. And we do respond to every question that gets submitted.
Yeah.
So please, when we send out this link, please reply. Let us know what you thought and ask questions there. We'd love to talk to you more. And we learn a lot from the questions that you ask. So it's definitely a two-way street just by engaging with you in that way.
Yeah, and so speaking of unanswered questions, Lindsay, we'll get to you certainly when we send out the recording, which everybody who registered will get. We do have, if you want some more insights, we do have this ebook that is easily downloadable if you go to that bit.ly/getmoreROI URL. Thank you so much to Paul and Ashley.
Our pleasure.
Steve and I really enjoyed this conversation with you, and we hope everyone listening did as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for joining.
Thank you.